Hello, listener, and welcome to this preview of our latest Patreon-exclusive episode. To continue the conversation and listen to the full episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Hello, patrons. I'm Michael, and welcome to this patron-exclusive episode of Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about GoldenEye, the 1995 film, screenplay by Jeffrey Kane and Bruce Firestein, directed by Martin Campbell. I'm joined, of course, by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello. Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
See, I said the second hello first, and then I said
Right.
the first hello, and then the second hello.
Right. Instead of Bittner, Brian Bittner. It was
Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Wow.
got it. I'm on
That's
the
a
same
deep
wavelength.
one, Brian.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys.
And that's
Layers.
that might be all I have to offer today. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so this is sort of the fun denouement to our brief spy spring mini season that we kept short because there's exciting, more fun stuff coming very soon. So we
More
talked about
fun? What do you mean more fun? Oh, you mean additional fun?
additional
Okay,
fun.
great.
Sorry.
Like when there's fun, and then there's like a sequel to that fun. That's what.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah, the more fun is always better than the first fun. The Bourne movies we talked about, and that era we sort of talked about how it changed what Bond was and helped usher in the Craig Bond era and really changed action in a lot of ways and sort of adopted this more cynical, dark, realistic, gritty, like you could feel the realism of it and the filmmaking and the acting and all the different things. So it's fun to go back, rewind the clock a little bit to only 1995. In my head, it was a lot earlier than that. But 1995, mid-90s, the very first Pierce Brosnan Bond, GoldenEye. So I watched this movie obsessively. I remember going to the theater, I think, like I was really excited and my parents were like, this is going to be your first Bond movie. Let's kind of see like what it's going to be. I was 9, which feels young.
Wow. There were things in this movie you didn't get.
No, right over my head, which is where they should be if you're 9 years old.
Right on the top of your head.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I like fell in love with this movie immediately. The action was cool. This was the first compact disc I ever bought, was the soundtrack to GoldenEye, because I wanted to be a cool kid and have like a cool CD. So obviously the soundtrack to GoldenEye, I listened to it a lot. And it was really interesting and kind of charming to go back and revisit the Brosnan era of Bond. And there are things that I do kind of miss. Like this was my first Bond and this was kind of the impression that I had. And so the sort of like the charming gentleman, it's a little playful. His first line is a pun, right? Bond speaks and what is it like? Forgot to knock as he's hanging upside down in the toilet with a guy and then punches him in the face. So there's just a lot of like fun and lightheartedness in this movie. It's also interesting, all of the kind of post-Soviet, post-Cold War stuff, again, as a child, went completely over my head. And now I appreciate it a lot more, especially after watching Turning Point, the documentary that Alex and Brian called out, which is really great. Everyone go watch it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things to talk about on top of just cool action and the way 90s movies did action and lighting. And there's some cool twists. We got a Sean Bean like midpoint I want to talk about. So lots of fun things. But I want to hear from you guys. Trisha, you are our Bond connoisseur. How do you feel about GoldenEye?
I love GoldenEye. It is a great movie. Like, for just a spy action movie, even if you've never seen a Bond movie, you will enjoy this movie. It's got amazing action sequences. The opening is wonderful. The tank sequence is absolutely iconic in the middle here. But also, there's a great villain with like a cool backstory that is connected to Bond. And like, I don't know, it does so much so well. honestly. And yeah, really feel like it understands its own like tone, its own thing. It seems to be very confident in the launching of its thing. And I just really, yeah, I have almost nothing to complain about it. Like, I think it's great. It was not my first Brosnan Bond. My first Brosnan Bond was The World Is Not Enough.
Interesting.
Which that was actually my first Bond movie ever. The World Is Not
Really?
Enough. Yeah, exactly. Because I was the same age as you, Michael, and my parents didn't let me see this when I was 9 years old, and so I waited a few years, and that was The World Is Not Enough, and so that was the one that I saw first. But I immediately just kind of fell in love with the whole thing and the character and just I don't know, they're so slick and splashy and just entertaining. Like, just all the popcorn, it's so good. Like, it's what movies are. And yeah, like, I think that there's really smart storytelling here also. We know that just putting all the Bond stuff in a movie does not necessarily make a Bond movie good. You have to construct it thoughtfully. And like, this was a thoughtfully constructed movie. Now, it is interesting, and we can talk more about it later. I believe up until No Time to Die got pushed 3 times, or however many times No Time to Die got pushed. The gap between License to Kill, which was in 1989, the Timothy Dalton one, and this one, 6 years, I believe that was the longest gap ever.
It was only 3 was the longest up until then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of expectations being placed on this Bond movie. And it was kind of a surprise that it wasn't going to be another Timothy Dalton, because he was contracted for 3 and he had only made 2. And there was a lot of tension around casting a new Bond and the big long gap and all this stuff. So yeah, I think there's just so much. There was a lot that was different about this movie both in the development and production process. This was the first movie that didn't have any source material from any of Fleming's novels. So this was the first totally original Bond script. The world had dramatically changed after the end of the Cold War, and people were kind of like on the edge of their seats to see if Bond would be relevant or Bond could still exist. And I just think it's a really impressive showing, given all of that coming together, the weight of all of that on this movie. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll invoke the age difference and say that 1995 was my 1999 for you guys, right? When I was like 13, just at my most impressionable, most just like boyish, into action movies and stuff. So when I saw this movie for the first time a few days ago, I thought that boy might have liked this.
What?
Wow.
You never saw this?
Nope.
Wow.
This is also my first Brosnan Bond. I just
What?
Wow.
missed
Wait
that
a minute.
whole thing.
Double
Hang-
whammy. How
hang
did you
on.
keep this a secret for this long?
We need to watch
just
more
not
Brosnan
talking
Bond. If you have not seen any of them, Brian.
I don't know where to start.
Shocking. This is shocking.
I definitely had seen bits and pieces on TV and stuff, and there's, those bits and pieces were the reason I never watched them.
You've been actively hiding this. Like, and don't act like you haven't. You have had many, many opportunities to say something about this in the lead up to this episode. And
You're not
we've been set up, everyone. This is a setup.
Well done.
It's the long game.
So yeah, I saw this movie for the first time as a grown up, and this is the good one of the Brosnans, huh?
I really like the next one.
So
I also like Tomorrow Never Dies a lot.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff with this movie. It is very strange. It is very cheesy, and I want to get into the tone of it. I feel like there are times where the cheesiness is very much on purpose, and there are times where I think it thinks it's being really cool, and it's really not. And I also found myself kind of like there was a pacing thing that was surprising here, where there were times where I was just like, I'm a little bored, and this is a Bond movie, and that was really surprising to me. But there's also good stuff here. Sean Bean dies twice. Like, come on. There's a surprise Mini Driver, you know. And then,
right.
Yeah.
as you talked about at the top, Michael, we have the craziest thing to me is that this and Casino Royale have the same director in Martin Campbell.
They sure do.
So it's like, what does a 1995 Bond sort of not reboot? Because up until Craig, I was going through the first of each Bond, and they don't really do anything to be like, here's a new Bond or anything like that. They're just like, we're keeping up. Here's the next Bond movie. There just happens to be a different actor. The first couple, I think they do a lot of like story world build up before they introduce Bond. So you're already kind of into it. But then around Roger Moore, they're just like, no, and just like this movie and just like Casino Royale, it's just like we open on, here's a brand new actor you've never seen before. And that's Bond. And that's it. So it's, really interesting to see what a 95 first Bond movie and a 2006 first Bond movie directed by the same director, but pre and post Bourne, pre and post 9/11, pre and post, like all of the filmmaking that happened in those 10 years. Really fascinating. And I wonder how much of that it reminds me of Mad Max, with like the fact that George Miller made the original movies and made Fury Road, and Fury Road feels like it's made by like a 17-year-old like with a speed addiction or something, and it's like, oh no, you're in your 80s now. That's awesome. So yeah, lot to get into, but yes, this welcome me to Brosnan Bond.
It's like the Mummy all over again.
I'm staggered. Wow.
The tone thing is interesting because I was thinking about the Mummy. I was like, the Mummy is goofy, but it knows it's goofy the whole time. And then when it takes a break to be serious, I'm like leaning forward because it's like, we're going to do this right now. And this movie, I was like the Q sequence, which is awesome. Except it's not from this movie. It's from a completely other movie where I'm like, I want that movie. I want a movie where
it's like Austin Powers, basically.
What's that?
Yeah.
It's basically Austin Powers for a scene.
Right, exactly.
Right. Amazing. Okay. I'm happy. This is good. I'm glad that we have this perspective, because I was watching it with my wife, and I think she maybe had seen it once a long time ago, and sort of watching it with fresh eyes, and I think had similar feelings of like, I think at one point she did literally say, this is the good one, but like still enjoyed it for the reasons we're going to talk about. Okay. Well, so Alex, then tell me about GoldenEye.
I think like Trisha, this was not my first Brosnan Bond movie. I think it was Tomorrow Never Dies. And I loved Tomorrow Never Dies. Like, I think that was my introduction to Bond. I maybe had seen clips or a Sean Connery scene or whatever, but that was the first movie that I watched over and over again. And it just had, for me, that was the archetypal Bond movie, including like a remote control car and super cool, like Michelle Yeoh, like karate. And it was just, had everything. And it was just like this quintessential fun action movie. And then at some point, I went back and watched GoldenEye, and compared to Tomorrow Never Dies, I think GoldenEye has just so many odd things in it. Tomorrow Never Dies, all these Brosnan movies are kind of goofy, and they have strange, over-the-top Bond things. But I feel like the strangeness of GoldenEye really, took my young brain for a loop. We've talked about before the trauma caused by Titanic in the car scene, where it's like, there's a hand on the window. What happened to her? What's going on in that car? I think it's sex. Is that what sex is? It did not help.
And then you saw GoldenEye, and you're like, "Is that what sex is?"
It didn't help to watch this movie. And then Miss Onatop is in a yacht with this guy. They're being really aggressive, and then something's happening. It's not clear what's happening, but he's dying. She's really loving it. I don't understand. Can you kill somebody via sex? Like, what part of this? How does this work? This went into the collection of like movies that really confused young Alex about what is sex and what is happening.
I want that letterbox list.
It's basically like it's around this like 95 to 97 period of just these like, Titanic. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, GoldenEye had a weird place in my Brosnan, or like, I think for me, it was always Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and then GoldenEye, because GoldenEye just was odd in this way that I couldn't wrap my head around as a kid. Partially also just like the Cold War stuff, I didn't understand any of that. So even just like story-wise, I didn't really follow the plot well as a younger person in GoldenEye. Whereas the plot in like Tomorrow Never Dies, I guess I won't say spoilers because Brian hasn't seen any of them. But
don't worry about it.
You know, it's a simpler plot. It's like
does tomorrow die?
It's like an evil guy wants to create a war to like create news, and then that's like an idea I could get as a kid. Whereas all the intricacies of why does Sean Bean's character hate everybody, like, and stuff that Britain
it's
did
really
after the Cold
complicated.
War. Yeah, it's really complicated.
Yeah.
So all that is to say, I really enjoyed revisiting it as an adult and understanding it a lot more. And I also just was delighted by, I think, this is a very strange movie, as Brian was saying, in the way that most Bond movies are strange and have a lot of strange things in them. And it's really only the Daniel Craig Bonds that try to kind of have like a really cohesive, grounded, realistic universe. They still have some weird stuff in them. But I think there's a special strangeness to the Bond franchise that I love. And I think this movie is like extra special in how like, the tone we're talking about, both serious good action, but also like the most sexual innuendo, double entendre, like nonstop quips. And just the embracing of almost like embarrassing over the topness in the villainy, especially with Onatop. It's just like, it's a special chemistry that only exists in this franchise. And I think this movie really like holds all of it.
Hope you enjoyed this preview clip. To continue the conversation and listen to the entire episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes.